Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.
This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now, from the Sunbury Motors studio, here's Steve Jones.
Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15, Hummel's Wharf. Online at sunburymotors.com. Ford, Kia, Hyundai, best in new inventory, great pre-owned inventory with the Sunbury Motors guarantee. And fabulous service department that backs it all up. Routine, difficult, they handle it all. Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15, Hummel's Wharf. Online, sunburymotors.com. Let's see. Chop Robinson is declared for the NFL draft and will not play in the Peach Bowl. Chop put out on Twitter, I think in the last hour he put it out. I told Jack about it a few days ago, but that's what he's decided to do. Hey, look, I think he has a chance to be an extremely high draft pick. Even the door open to being a first-round draft pick. If you're around Chop, even for a couple minutes, you can, right away, you just know he's a terrific guy. And, we all see his athleticism, but if you're around him personally, can't say enough really good things about everything that about him. And he's decided that he wants to go to the draft. Hey, you had his kind of athleticism, quality. He'll interview well. He's the kind of guy that makes organizations better. He'll go through the process and be outstanding at it. So he's going to forego the Peach Bowl, and he's going to enter the NFL draft. And all of us expect that he will be a high draft pick. See how the process plays. I can't guarantee somebody's a first-round pick. Can't do that. Because you know how crazy these things play out. We all thought for sure Joey Porter Jr. would be a first-round draft pick. And ended up being the 32nd pick in a 32-team league. But because, I think, who was it? They didn't have a first-round pick last year.
It was the Dolphins.
Yeah. Didn't. So, that's the second time in the history of Penn State football it's happened. Do you know that? Leo Wisniewski, Stefan Wisniewski's dad. It was the Saints that lost a pick. And he goes into the 82 draft, 81 season, 82 draft. And this was back when they were a 28-team league. And he was a 28th overall pick by the Colts. So his agent's saying, hey, look, there are 28 teams, we should get first-round money. And, of course, Irsay's owning them. Like, what were the odds of that? So it's actually happened twice to Penn State guys, where in a year where somebody lost a pick, they ended up being the next pick. And Joey, by the way, is playing like a guy who should have been a first-round pick. But Chop Robinson is declared for the draft. He will not play in the Peach Bowl. Tomorrow's show, by the way, is on the road. It's on the road tomorrow because I'll be doing the show from College Park. And there's a good reason for that. I'm in College Park to do basketball. So we have Nate Bauer today, Rich Scarcella tomorrow, Ross Tucker and Bill Bender on Thursday. Neil Coulon will join us on Friday. So that's how it's going to work. So because the Steelers are going to be playing that titanic matchup on Thursday Night Football, the game that's going to be 3-3 in the fourth quarter. Mercy. Oh. Will I watch the game? Oh, yeah, I'll watch the game. It's going to be interesting to hear how Al treats the game. But, yeah. Now here's the revolutionary sort of proposal. That the NCAA has put out. By the way, on the transfer portal front, 1,200 names are in the transfer portal in 24 hours. 1,200. I think it's 1,190 or something like that, but right around 1,200. Christian Driver yesterday, Alex Bacchetta yesterday, and then Jace Tutty, who's a walk-on. But Jace Tutty, when he got into the Michigan State game late, I talked about him being in the game with Jack, and the kind of invaluable walk-on that you just have nothing but the highest respect for. Nothing but the highest respect. And so I hope he can land someplace and start and star someplace. All right. Time now to skirt the line between genius and insanity. The Matt Catrillo Rant of the Week.
Are we talking about me or are we talking about the CFP committee? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm not so sure they got it wrong. I mean, you're talking about who are the four best teams right now. I'm not so sure they got that part wrong. I just don't like the fact that the alleged alliance from 2 years ago delayed having a 12-team playoff that would have started this year. And that's, Penn State should be getting ready for Ohio State right now, and Ole Miss should be getting ready for Georgia. Georgia?
Yeah,
No.
that's where I'm going to start because thank God this is the last year for a four-team CFP.
Maybe it's Oregon they would be getting ready for. I think Georgia's 5, right? No, Georgia's 6.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Georgia's 6. They'd be playing Georgia. Be a rematch.
Right.
Both would be rematches.
But thank God this is the last year of this four-team CFP, just because I get, are they technically, I guess, the four best teams that they picked? Yeah, but at the same time, I think we tend to get a little illogical when it comes to trying to determine best teams because we know these are the four best teams on paper, certainly, but as you and I both know, Steve, especially in football, it doesn't always turn out that way, which is what makes the sport so great, especially in college football. And now we go to the 12-team playoff starting next year, the games can start to determine that maybe a little bit more, I would think. But the way things were picked this year, who knows? Maybe it's not that way, and we're still having this conversation. It's just we've seen so many ridiculous arguments and illogical picks that has just thrown off to I don't know what to do as far as scheduling if I'm a college football athletic director next year. Florida State should be in this thing, period. There's no logic behind leaving them out. They're undefeated. They won their conference. This is the first time you're going to see a Power 5 school that won their conference out, which makes absolutely no sense at all. And it's all because they lost their quarterback in Jordan Travis. So that brings me to another point, too, besides just giving this Florida State team a chance when you have so much time to get ready for a game regardless of who you've got at quarterback. I thought the NCAA a couple of years ago said they were all about the student-athletes' well-being, especially mental well-being. Let's ask that to Jordan Travis, who literally just put out the other day, quote, "I wish I broke my leg a few weeks earlier." That is just not right for an athlete to think that way, that a serious injury like a broken leg, I wish it would have happened a couple of weeks ago so I'd be back in time. the fact that we're getting to a point where players actually have to say that out loud in public is a travesty to me, and it's so unfortunate. Because now you've got Jordan Travis all over this now.
That's just the emotion coming out. That's
right. But I'm just saying it's wrong for emotion like that to come out of a player because his team is literally not in because he got hurt and they only won 16-6 last week against Louisville. I just think that's wrong.
He's always been a little emotional, and part of it is that back in the even not that long ago, he was getting booed in the stadium. We're booing the coaches. No, you weren't. Okay. You're booing his performance. And he took that to heart, which anybody in the public eye cannot do. He cannot do that. But he's more sensitive in that way based on what people say about him. And so he took it to heart. Well, he's taken this to heart, too, which is unfortunate.
It is. And guess what now with the second part? Now that Alabama's in, guess what? They're going to win this whole thing yet again, which is outrageous because they should be on the outside looking in. Texas got in, which is what they should have done because they won their conference. Yeah, they lost the game, but they had to head-to-head by beating Alabama. You put Alabama in there, that loss to Texas basically meant nothing. And really the win for Alabama, the win against Alabama for Texas pretty much meant nothing because they still got in anyway, regardless of what happened in that game. That was one of the better games of the year, and the CFP basically just X'd that game out by putting both of them in there. And guess what? Alabama's playing the best football out of anybody right now, and so is their quarterback, and they're going to win this whole thing. They're going to beat Michigan, and they'll beat either Washington or Florida State or
Washington and Texas.
Or Washington, Texas. They're going to beat them soundly. And I think if it's Alabama versus one of those two teams, they're going to beat them soundly
in the
championship game.
I'm not so sure about that. Do I think Alabama will beat Michigan? Yes. Am I so sure they would beat Texas again? I'm not so sure about that. I'm not so sure about. And remember, I know you'll split the tickets and whatever, but where's the game? Houston. Hey, there are going to be a lot of Texas. There are going to be a lot of Texas fans there, and the last 2 years, Texas has really matched up with Alabama. Because remember, when Alabama won in Austin, it was 21-20. This year, Texas won by double digits. Texas matches up pretty well with them if it turns out that those two are playing again.
Yeah, I guess soundly was the wrong word for Texas. But if they play Washington, they would beat them soundly. But I think that it would be fun. It would be a fun game if the two of them had a rematch in the national championship game. But that's just how I feel about that when it comes to Alabama. I'm just ready for 12 teams next year because then at the very least, these illogical arguments should at least die down considerably next year because I've about had it with the way this has gone this year because this 4-team playoff format, to me, is going out in absolutely embarrassing fashion.
Well, again, this is the fault of Jim Phillips, Kevin Warren, and George Kliavkoff. This is their fault. They formed that fraud alliance, and it was a fraud. All right?
No question.
Nothing signed. And what did they end up doing? They ended up delaying a 12-team playoff in the process, which I railed against at the time. I said, what are you doing? I was really. I remember I was taken aback by the whole thing. And this is one of those where I just sit back and just shake my head. They're at fault. Meanwhile, one guy's collecting checks from the Chicago Bears and could care less.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And the other thing, obviously, is going to be going to everything that happened with the Eagles on Sunday. Well, I'm going to start with stuff on the field, and then we'll get to everything that happened off the field with the Eagles security guy and stuff like that. As far as on the field goes, I'm looking at two guys. I'm looking at Sean Desai, first of all, and I'll give him credit. I didn't have a whole lot of faith in him when the Eagles brought him in because I knew his style is similar to Jonathan Gannon, but for the most part this year, up to this game, he's done a nice job, especially he's been a whole heck of a lot better than Jonathan Gannon as far as making adjustments, especially in the second half. But This game on Sunday was complete rock bottom. You give up 6 straight touchdown drives after you only gave up 2 straight 3-and-outs to start the game. Now it's on the offense to take advantage of that and make it a 14-0 game instead of a 6-0 game. We'll get to that in a second. But the fact of the matter is, you had them on the ropes. The pass rush was getting after them in the first quarter. Everything. They had -6 total yards of offense after one quarter. Then all of a sudden they flip a switch and they score 42 points? Come on. I mean, that's just not good coaching right there. That just shows me that you had absolutely no answer, and he took responsibility for it today. He said I have to flat out make better calls. Well, absolutely right. And you had to make better adjustments because the Eagles simply couldn't handle all the pre-snap motion, and then that led to all the yards after the catch because guys were out of position and couldn't make tackles. And when the rare times they were in position, they obviously didn't execute and make tackles, i.e. Nicholas Morrow. So this defense has a whole lot to do. But I said this on Twitter after the game. The Eagles are now dead last against.
Can I ask you, other than throwing a punch, did Jalen Carter show up? No. Your rookie is slumping, and he's slumping badly here down the stretch.
It was. I'm not sure what he was also emotional about during the. I think it was sometime during the second half. That kind of raised an eyebrow a little bit. But yeah, that was not his best game. And he was tremendous last week against Buffalo. I mean, he was in the backfield a lot. He had the blocked field goal, but he was not good yesterday.
Jordan Davis was really good. Carter, the last month has been eh. And on Sunday, he was at a milk carton.
Other than the Buffalo game, I would agree with that when it comes to Jalen Carter. And yeah, Jordan Davis has shown tremendous progress. I mean, as far as his conditioning and everything else, I mean, the one play he had a couple of weeks ago, I think it was even in the Buffalo game or the Kansas City game where he ran down a couple of guys. I mean, that was huge. I mean, that just shows his growth right there.
He's played better, but again, in the fourth quarter against Buffalo, like they had to take him off the field because he was exhausted. He's still not in the best shape. They had to take him off the field because he's exhausted. I think he is a really good player in spurts. But again, you know, this team is, again, they're an 8-4 team that's 10-2.
Yeah, I guess when you look at the schedule. Now going to the offensive side of things, I'll go to one thing. Well, first of all, let me start with this with Nick Sirianni before we get to the run game and what happened in the red zone. He said 2 weeks ago about guys using whatever they wanted for motivation, whether it's the quote-unquote bulletin board material, whatever. He said if you want to use it, it's not a distraction, use it. But if it's a distraction, don't use it. Okay, I can deal with that. But then apparently he used all of the things that the 49ers said this week, how they were taking this game personal and this and that. He used that in his pregame meeting with the team Saturday night going into the game. I mean, what are you doing? The 49ers, for all the offseason, have been doing nothing but whining and complaining about what happened in the NFC Championship game, how things didn't go their way. Maybe they would have won the game if they had Brock Purdy, blah, 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 blah. Let them deal with whatever they want to be there. If they want to be the ones to whine and complain and moan and use that as motivation and take this game personal, let them do it. Don't put yourself and your team in that spot because then you're going to get the nonsense that happened in the second half of the game. So I thought that was a rather childish move on Nick Sirianni's part to use that as the vocal point of your speech the night before the game. I thought that was completely irresponsible by Nick Sirianni. Now, as far as the offense goes, obviously the red zone rows need to be fixed. That was a big part of this game. Then secondly, in his Monday press conference yesterday, he's asked about the run game. He says, quote, "We know we need to establish the run game. We know we have to be better in the run game." Then do it. After the last few games, especially against San Francisco last week, it's pass, 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 pass. I know you got A.J. Brown. I know you got Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, you name it. But you have a guy named DeAndre Swift who is in the top 5 rushing in the league right now. And you have behind the best offensive line, who, by the way, is also struggling right now in pass protection because you're passing the ball way more often than you're running the football. The reason why this team got to the Super Bowl last year was because of the run game to set up the pass game and all the weapons that you have, not vice versa. So, yes, establish the run. If you want to win in Dallas and all these games in the postseason, that's what you have to do. Run the football, establish the run to start, stop throwing the ball 50 times a game.
And as for your security guy, okay, that's not your job. Stay out of it, okay? You can be all the hero. He's a hero in Philadelphia. For what? Okay? You have no place being where he was. His job is to be security if a fan comes out there. Okay? Stay back. He has no business being there. That the glorification of him I find to be disgusting. Okay? You should not be near an opposing team's player. You shouldn't be anywhere near the field to play. That's me. Should not be near the field to play. What are you doing there? Your job is in case a fan comes out. That's your job. Your job is not to get in somebody's face on the sideline. It's not your job.
The whole thing was unfortunate.
No, the whole thing was wrong, and he should have backed off and not been anywhere near it.
This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now, from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
And today's show brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15, Almost Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. For Kia Hyundai, the best in new inventory, great pre-owned inventory with the Sunbury Motors guarantee. Terrific service department, routine, difficult. They handle it all at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15, Almost Wharf, and online, sunburymotors.com. I know they made a big deal about, hey, he'll be a hero in Philadelphia. No offense, the security guy should be suspended. He has no business being where he was and doing what he did. Okay? Shouldn't be there. Sorry, your job is to keep the fans away from Nick Sirianni. Your job is not to get involved with the opposing team. Sorry, he should be suspended. Right? That's not his place to be involved in that. It's not his place. Let's bring in Nate Bauer, the great Nate Bauer, on 3.com, Blue White Illustrated. Sir, always a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. What's going on?
Not too much. They point me toward whatever I talk.
Sure.
So, yeah, this is the role I have. Let's start with Chop Robinson. No surprise.
Sure.
So Chop is going to opt out of the Peach Bowl. He's going to go to the draft, and I think this was expected, about a year ago.
Yeah. How about that? The guy who is exceptional and has really earned his reputation is making the leap and very much belongs in that conversation. I mean, he's just been so electric, so flashy, right? For if that's a word that counts. I mean, he's just always around the ball and has been so disruptive for Penn State's defense. I had a little bit of question as to whether or not Penn State could pull off convincing him to stick around on a limited rep schedule, right? I mean, it's certainly something that James Franklin has alluded to before. They really try to massage the situation as well as they can with these guys to just get them to continue to be a part of the team, right? To still be around, enjoy the bowl trip, what have you. But it's really a narrative and a storyline that works counter to what has become, kind of accepted thinking, right? In terms of what agents are saying, what the NFL has kind of presented of, okay, you did your work, all your work is done. Begin the process, right? Begin the process of maximizing every day and getting yourself ready for certainly the combine and then the NFL draft after that.
Yeah, I mean, No question. That's and James, really starting with Saquon Barkley, that was about the first time we really saw how they worked out the ability to the only guy that opted out of last year's game was Joey Porter Jr. Everybody else played, and they were able to massage minutes for players along the way. But everybody has their own way of doing it and going about it. And so this is what they decided to do. Interesting because Caleb Williams is opting out of USC's game in the Holiday Bowl, but it looks like Bo Nix is going to play in the Fiesta Bowl. So everybody has to make their own decision.
Yep. Yeah, it's I'm just not sure that I'm not sure that there's a defined right way to do it. I think the thing again, the thing that Franklin tries to do is get people to, and when I say people, I mean the player and their family. Look, first of all of these guys have insurance policies, right? That they are insured against catastrophe for the season. That is not at issue. You never want to put your guys in a bad position, though, or in a place where they can get hurt or something that would happen to them that would throw off their NFL career. But that's why they handle it the way that they do, right? Having Chop available or anybody else, I'm assuming that this won't be the last one for Penn State. It's just kind of a give and take of how guys feel, how their parents feel, the people around them, and agents, and so on and so forth, as to whether or not it feels like a worthwhile investment on their part to remain part of the program, part of the team until the bowl game ends. So we'll see, right? I mean, Kalen's got a decision to make. Olu is, of anybody, right? He's got the biggest decision to make. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Does On3.com carry heavy insurance on you and Fitz and Snyder and Pickle?
You would hope. We're there's no insurance for us opting out. I can tell you that. But catastrophic injury. I think we're covered. Thank God.
Just a thought to throw it out there. What do you think about the matchup with Ole Miss in the Peach Bowl?
Yeah, I think it's great for Penn State, and honestly, it's great for Ole Miss. I think it's two programs that I can't remember if we talked after the Michigan game. I feel like we did, where I kind of ran some numbers at that point in the season, and it was incredible how much of a mirror image the two programs were, not from a playing style, any of that stuff, just in terms of perceptions, how perceptions are shaped about top teams, right? Top 10, top 15. Ole Miss was the most direct comp in terms of quality of competition that Ole Miss had to play versus Penn State, what Penn State had played. If you go through the list, right, all of these other teams, the Big Ten East and the schedule that Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State play is not like anybody else. Bottom line, it is not like anybody else in college football. They are three of the top 8 winning percentages in college football over the past 8 years, I want to say.
Yep.
If you look, the SEC West has a great reputation, obviously. The difference between Alabama, LSU, and Texas A&M is way below the top 8.
No question.
Right? Like,
no question.
It's not remotely close.
Yep.
LSU's in that conversation. Obviously, Alabama is, but it is a huge departure. And so wrapping this up, Ole Miss is the only team in the SEC in that conversation. Missouri didn't have to play both Georgia and Alabama.
That's right.
They are the only ones that did, and so there's kind of a direct corollary there in terms of who they have faced, who Penn State has faced, and the quality of wins that they have.
Which then brings us to the college football playoff, the way it played out. Now, the roots of this do go back to the fraud alliance that Kevin Warren and Jim Phillips and George Kliavkoff, because they kept delaying the 12-team playoff. It should be this year. Ole Miss should be getting ready for a rematch against Georgia, and Penn State should be getting ready for a rematch at Ohio State. All right? Instead, we still have 4 for the final time because these 3, messed it up. Simple as that.
Yep.
All right? I mean, they did. Yep. I mean, that's the roots of it, just so everybody knows. I mean, it has to be talked about more. What are the roots of something? Well, that's the roots of this going back. But in the end, Florida State is undefeated and out. Alabama is in. Your thoughts?
I have. It's interesting because I think that sometimes I come across as not liking college football because I have strong opinions about the ways that it needs to change. I feel the way that I do because I like college football. I think it deserves so much better. I think fans deserve better. I think the media deserves better. And absolutely, I think the teams that are playing the games deserve better than to have 13 people sitting in a closed-door conference room deciding that. I think those people deserve better than this, right? Than this system. Right. It is patently dumb to have these be the parameters. It is something that is wildly different from any other sport, and people want to make the claim that that's what makes that's what makes college football such a great and unique sport. It's not. It does not help. It does not behoove college football to have a playoff where the representation of its participants is 3%. There's nothing remotely like it in pro sports. And guess what? These are pro sports, and that includes college sports. The NCAA tournament is close to 20%. NCAA baseball, you name it, across the board, playoffs for all of these sports has representation 15% plus. It is a wild departure, and it is patently unfair that these teams aren't getting into it. And it hurts the sport, not just right now. It hurts the sport's future. The lack of parity, the problems that you see in the game in terms of it being so one-sided. You have these great dynasties. It precludes the ability of programs to sell, hey, you might have a shot at making the playoffs. These things are going to be corrected next year to a certain extent. They can take more steps than they have. Expanding to 16, I think, is absolutely warranted.
Yes,
but this is a step in the right direction, and it is a shame, I think, and an embarrassment to college football that it took this situation this year for everyone to kind of finally get on the same page and say, "Man, this is really dumb. This is a really dumb way to operate the ability to crown a champion in one of the best sports there is."
And I agree. There isn't anything there. You said that I didn't, and I know how much you love the sport because you make commentaries because you care. I mean, you care about it. And that's why you make the commentaries you do, trying to make it better, which then brings us to the Charlie Baker proposal that he'd like to throw out there. Essentially what he's trying to do here, and tell me if I'm correcting the dots correctly, I looked at it as we want you to have autonomy in the world of NIL and so forth, but not break away from the NCAA. That's how I viewed what he proposed.
Yep. No, I think that's right. I mean, look, I can see a lot of different ways that this goes. I think that certainly the sport has, James Franklin says this all the time, has made more changes. The sport has changed more dramatically over the past 5 years than the prior 30. And so some of the dogma that exists in the sport is starting to fade a little bit, which I think is good in a large way. What is curious to me, what I will be interested to see is whether or not the conference allegiances, right? We've been talking about expansion for so long that I'm wondering if the next step isn't actually shedding teams, right? Yeah. Shedding programs, finding a common space or allegiances that cross boundaries, that cross conferences, where you put together the big boys, for lack of a better right?
Exactly.
Like put together the programs that spend what they spend on this, right? Because I actually I see it as not fair in a lot of ways to programs that do things the right way, but will never have the resources of Penn State, right? Of Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, right? And so at what point do you get to a place where it makes sense to have 32 teams, 40 teams, right? Who are all kind of who want to participate in that type of a system, and then have a next step down and give them ability to have a championship, to crown a champion of that level of play. Because right now, I just think what you see is you've got a mess in a lot of different directions. NIL is a big part of it. We are going to move at some point into collective bargaining. There will be the ability at some point of the universities themselves or the conferences, what have you. I don't know what that structure is going to look like, but players are going to get paid, right? It is long overdue. It's just a matter of sorting out how all of this is going to look. But I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that we're done. We're not done. This is going to continue to change. In a lot of ways, I think it's going to change for the better.
Well, the NCAA would like to have Congress bail them out
Not
and
going to
do
happen.
this, right? And and to the credit of those in Congress, there have been several that have said, "Hey, you need to work this out yourself," because and here's the bottom line: if I'm going before the Commerce Committee about the Commerce Department budget, the people sitting up there asking the questions, because it's their committee, are extremely well versed in the issues of the Commerce Department. But if it comes to a sports thing, they are not well versed as to how sports actually works. That's why I don't want them doing it, because it's not their area of expertise. And that's why I prefer they not be involved in it.
Yeah, I mean, I see a few things here. One, I think that the way that things are currently structured, Title IX is a massive hurdle to getting this to operate independently, right? To have
That's right.
college football and men's college basketball be separate and apart. That's the loophole of what these collectives are in a lot of ways. Is being able to kind of skirt that. They're clinging to amateurism. There's a lot of stuff that I understand, even from my perspective of things that I would like to see change, that it's not as easy as snapping your fingers and saying, hey, just make it this way. These are public institutions. They are taxpayer funded in a lot of ways. I'm not saying completely, but they're not separate and apart. Right? There are tax dollars that goes into this. And so there are laws on the books that demand operating in a certain way. So they got to figure that out. They got to figure that out. There has to be they have to put these smart people in a room and figure out how you do that without violating the law. Right? And so I don't know what that looks like. But certainly there are challenges that for the sport to reach its potential, if it's going to stay on this course, which I believe it is, it's going to continue on this trajectory. It's only going to get, it's only going to be furthered. They're going to have to figure those things out.
Right. And look, I remember when it was the O'Bannon case, and Mark Emmert testified. And I don't even think the O'Bannon people asked a question, because in direct examination, he's talking about the ivory tower and the whole thing. And, of course, everybody's just nodding their heads. Meanwhile, the O'Bannon people are like, keep going. You're winning the case for us. Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. All he had to do was get up and at least open the door and tell everybody where the money goes. Because every sport except for two loses money. How do you make up for it? Okay, in order to, you just look at the jury or the judge and say, how many of you were in favor of women's sports? Everybody put their hand up. Well, how do you pay for it? Yep. You got to pay for it. This is how we pay for it, and that's what he had to say.
And I mean, I think just maybe yesterday, the day before, Oregon is has a lawsuit now that they're handling with some of the women's student athletes who are claiming, probably rightfully, that things that are being like you just cannot you're in violation of the law if you are not expending the same resources toward women as you do for men. But you got to it's so tricky because it feels like there's landmines everywhere in the conversation, but there shouldn't be. There is a world where college athletics can continue to exist, resources can continue to exist without making the whole thing crumble, because there is a bottom line reality to this that, like you said, there are 29 other sports. Forget women's, men's. Tennis doesn't exist without football.
Right.
For either gender. It does not matter.
Right.
And it is across the board. All of these sports are funded by what happens in basketball and football. And so at some point, rationale has to take over and say, hey, this is how these other things are funded, but exceptions need to be made, right? Something needs to happen to allow a what we all know exists to be true anyway, to finally recognize it as such.
Fabulous conversation. I really appreciate it. We kind of went a little far afield in a couple of areas, but I think it was important. No, but I thought it was important to talk about because these are the big issues that'll shape sports in the future.
No doubt. Penn State basketball.
Yep. Yeah, we'll talk about that again at some point.
Not great, Steve. That's my commentary.
Well, see if they can get back on track. How about that?
It's an uphill climb, but we'll see.
Well, I'll be there to chronicle it, so whatever the climb is.
As always.
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Nate Bauer. On 3.com, Blue Way Illustrated. Today's show brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15, Hummel's Wharf. And online at sunburymotors.com. Here on News Radio 1070 WKOK, your home for the suit.